share part. Okay. All right. So sharing. Okay. So if I could put your computers on mute, that would be good. I think we should be able to do that, but I'm not aware of how to do that on a Teams thing. I'm not sure if you have. So we've got a couple people with, I can tell, have their do not have not muted, but if we can do that, that'll be good. And today we're going to get into, so let me just make a couple announcements. One is Claire can't make it today. She's in another set of meetings that were required. Sydney Shumar, my technician, is running the chat room and take care of any problems that come up. And feel free to ask questions in the chat and she'll alert me to them like we've done in the past. And also feel free to contact me afterwards. And as usual, the each of these sessions will be up on Dan Carr's site, which we have had links to. I think that you get them every time we make an announcement about the class. So today we're going to start speeding up a little bit. So I'm going to now share my screen and, oops, that's the wrong button. So we're sharing the screen now. There we go. And we're going to go out of there and we're going to go to the B-Gener memorization scripts, which is just an Excel spreadsheet. I think most of you should have this. If you don't or you're new, you can get it from Claire. She can email it to you. But this is the, as a reminder, this is the set of minimal characters for each species that you'll want to have memorized so that when you're looking at a specimen, you can be confident that you have the correct genus without having to go all the way through the Discover Life guides. We're going to do both today. We're going to start with a completely new creature. We're out of Andrina land. We'll come back to that when we start doing species, but we're going to work on Anthidiellum. So we're basically going alphabetical. So Anthidiellum is a small species in the Megachilidae group in the Anthidiellini subfamily, and it's characterized by a lot of, it's small and it has lots of colored patches. Either red if you're in the deep south here in the east or yellow elsewhere. And we will flip to the microscope now so we can start looking at some of the characteristics, if I can get to the microscope, for Anthidiellum. So I also want to show you, we talked about this last time about the marginal, it's not necessarily one of the things you have to have for Anthidiellum, but we talked about the marginal cell. Oh, wait, I can boost up my pointer size again, which I know was useful. Let's see if we do this and go to pointer, change mouse size. Bum, bum, bum. Sorry for not doing this beforehand. There we go. And now we can go back. There we go. Okay, so we're looking at an Anthidiellum, and we're going to look at the marginal cell, and we're going to talk about the tip of the marginal cell not being on the margin, which separates out big groups of species. So in the classic Michener Guide to the Bee Genera of North America, this was used a lot and got confusing sometimes because some species within a genus sometimes don't behave well, but this is a classic case where you have a very well-defined apex to the marginal cell that is not sitting on the margin itself. So this is in our guide too, as we use their guide as a basis and then added a whole lot more. And then we overscored things that we thought were ambiguous. We're always looking for feedback. Okay, orientation, this is the tip of the wing of the little Anthidiellum. Here's the marginal cell. And you can see, I think, a little bit that this is the apex of the marginal cell is well away from the margin. So in Andrina, the apex was basically right at the margin itself. So the fact that you have the very tip of the marginal cell that's not sitting on the margin is a good identification characteristic for separating out of big groups if you're doing straight keying. As we'll emphasize, you want to be able to just look at a lot of these genera and get some kind of understanding what it probably is by memorizing things. Okay, so now I should have clicked on that particular wing shot. We're going to go and see that within many of the groups within Megachilidae, you have, instead of, and this is a very dark winged specimen, so it's a little bit tricky to see, I think, compared to the more clear winged ones, but should be good enough to see. You have a two-celled submarginal wing situation instead of the more common three in Halictidae and elsewhere. This is difficult to see, I think. Here's our tip of our marginal cell that's sitting away from the margin. Here is that whole cell. The stigma, which in this group is very small, is there. And then here are the two marginal cells. And you can see it's split basically right in the middle. So we kind of have a sense that it was purposefully built that way rather than having a only one cross vein somewhere towards the front or the back, meaning that there could have been a missing one in that particular specimen of what we're looking at. But two submarginal cells are a pretty standard feature for most of Megachilidae, not all. And now we're going to look at something that for me was confusing when it was described, which is the lamellate or shelf-like scutellum, which is in a lot of people's books distinctive, but if you look at its sister taxa, which we should have time for today, it's a little bit difficult to discern between Anthidium and Anthidiellum, sometimes the presence of this shelf-like aspect. So orientation again, here's the abdomen. We have the pin going through the scutum up here, the head's up there. This is the scutellum. Here are the axillae off to either side, not pointed, so they're conforming to the general shape of the scutellum. And here is this shelf-like part of the scutellum. So by shelf-like or lamellate, I keep wanting to say laminate, but it's not. It means basically a thin projecting feature of the bee, I would call it. We'll turn it sideways too, but you can see here that the that like in most genera, the scutellum is just rounded over to the propodium. And in this particular case, you can see the scutellum is projecting out and it has this very thin area, and you can't really even see the propodium and other features back there. So if we change the angle on this, you'll see it again. So it's very pronounced, but if you haven't seen it before, you start second guessing your looks at Anthidium sometimes. So if we can turn this sideways. I am hearing someone has turned off their, put their thing on mute. I wish I knew how to just mute everybody. Pardon? What did you say, Sid? Okay, let's see. I'm going to try and do this muting thing. So go to participants and do what, Sydney? Okay. Yeah. I still can't figure out how to put everyone on mute. So show participants. So I'm talking my way through this. Maybe Claire, if she's on this, or maybe you can email Claire and she'll let us know. Okay, we're going back here to the microscope. And so I'm attempting now to show the lamellate scutellum from the side. So here we are again. It curves over, so it's not going to show well, I think. Here's the abdomen.
Also, Sam,
Yep.
make the microscope bigger.
Oh, I got it. Let's get that. Thank you, people, for helping on that. And get rid of that. Okay, good. Oh, that is much better. All right. So we have a focus thing going on here. So here's this lamellate area of the scutellum. Again, a little bit difficult to portray exactly, but you can see that it's thinned out and you can't see the edge of the propodium there. If we back, we just note the axilla here. In other groups, there's a point that is projecting out away from the edge of the body, but not in this case. All right, another feature of Anthidiellum that helps separate it from Anthidium is the aeroleum, or the aerolia, depending on plural or not. Let me get this down. On the so first of all, while we have this in view, in Anthidiellum in North America, at least, there are always yellow colored areas, or sometimes a deep red colored area, or maculation is sometimes what they're called, throughout the abdomen and the thorax. And that's you'll see that in the guide, but it's a characteristic that they all have and is part of that identification string. There's not an all black one here. Now, other parts of the world, I could be wrong about that. So I need a shot of the leg here. This might be it right there. That will allow me to look at the pad between the tarsal claws and see if we can really, this is a small b, so so if we focus in now,
Hey, Sam.
yeah.
I looked up how to mute everyone, and someone mentioned it as well. Claire's not getting.
Okay.
Can you go to get participants again?
Okay, I'm gonna mute everyone. So, okay, participants. Okay. Where did that show up? Oh, I got it. One of the meeting but you. Yes. Okay. We are good. Look at that. I'm learning something. All right. Here is the leg. So we have believe this is basotarsus and tarsal segments, and at the end is the claw, and in the middle, I'll try and change the perspective on this, is a pad. So Anthidium, which looks remarkably like Anthidiellum, no shelf-like thing, but something that if you didn't see it, you might also think maybe it does have a shelf, but it has no pad between the two tarsal claws. Let's see if I can make this a little bit easier to see by changing the perspective on this. Let's try that. Bringing up the magnification. Yeah, a little bit better. So here's the last tarsal segment, claws on the tip of it, and then there's this pad with some extra junk, as they often have, between the two tarsal claws. This just points out another reason to hold these things in your fingers, is you can rotate this back and forth to better pick out the aeroleum. So those features are the ones that largely define Anthidiellum. If we go, we're going to jump now to the guide and very quickly jump through some of the characters there to, so we're clicking on discoverlife.org just to walk you through using the guide now too, because it's fine for me to say that you should have all this memorized, but you're going to want to be using the genera guide quite a bit at the beginning, just to confirm some of your identifications. So Discover Life, shortcut is the bumblebee. We get to the Apoidea page, we click to the jumps for IDs. There's the genera guide, we click on that. We're back in, left side are all the genera. On the right side, we have a whole series of questions. We know that this is from Maryland, so we're going to click Maryland. We can see there that says 55 things are scored. There's 55 kinds match. Now we've dropped the guide in half. And so these are the genera that could show up in Maryland. We also are, I'm going to go back and we'll look at arched subantennal sutures, which is a feature difficult to see sometimes in this group. But if we just walk through the guide here, again, we're going to skip a lot of this stuff that we've talked about several times now. Thorax, primary color, it's neither blue-ish or metallic bluish or bright green. It's something else. We're going to click that. That drops us down a little bit. If it were bright green, we'd really drop it down a lot. So we're looking at our workflow here, and you would begin to second guess and know these kinds of things. Thorax does have bright yellow markings on it. The axilla shape, that's down to 14. Axilla is not projecting, it's tame, but that's not going to do probably that much, but it'll probably drop out a couple things. Actually did nothing for us. 2 submarginal cells, we've already confirmed that. We're going to take a look at the vein again, the basal vein, and confirm probably that it is straight. Let's see if I can get this in the shot there. This is very dark. I'm going to switch to a another specimen that's got lighter wing. Let's see if this one works better. This is that was Anthidiellum perplexum. This is Anthidiellum notatum. Actually, I lied because perplexum does not occur in Maryland at this point. But Anthidiellum notatum does. So we're going to go now do our basal vein inspection. Zoom this up. See if I can learn to focus more quickly. Okay. Here is the tip of the marginal cell, the tiny stigma that these species have. This is a submarginal. Did I say that should be in the marginal cell? And here there's a wing that's partially, the hind wing is partially in the way, but you can see the basal vein here is very nearly straight. So it does not have that bent, strongly bent feature. So we're going to say gently throughout. That does actually not that much. Jugal vein to vannel I'm not going to bother with that because that's not that useful to me in terms of separating things out. And I really takes a long time for me to look at that. I am going to click that the aurelium was present. I'm not going to bother with the claw shape because I generally am not interested in doing that either. And I'm going to skip over the these features here too. I'm just going to hit simplify. So I'm going to come up with a new guide. I'm jumping around now, which is how people generally would do. I'm not bothering with links that could be helpful. So we're going to look at teeth. This is sometimes very useful. Let's take a look at, which I actually don't remember in Anthidiellum, what the tooth situation is. First of all, we have a male, so that's going to be different than the females. So it should be scored for both, but I'm trying to see if we can get a good look at this, the mandibles here. One character of Anthidiellum or Anthidiums is a lot of teeth on the mandibles. So here, we're zooming in. So one of the problems with mandibles, if they're not pulled out in a lot of groups, is that there might be teeth that are hidden because the mandibles, so here's, to orient you, here's one mandible, and here is the other mandible. They almost always lap over each other. So this one, the teeth would be hidden. On this one, they're visible unless there's teeth underneath the that we can't see because of how the mouth is conformed. But I believe I would want to look at this more closely. That appears to be a tooth there. So the end is always called a tooth. So there's 1, 2, and then really I don't want to spend too much time on this. I can't quite see what else is going on, but we'll play around with the guide. A lot of times this is the case. You really can't see because there might be glue on it or gooped up, and that's the usefulness here. So we will explore the guide at this point. So we know there's at least 2 teeth, but it may not be only 2. But if we click 2 teeth as if it only had 2, well, we know the answer. It's not on there, but we're going to leave 2 teeth in, and we're going to basically click all the rest. So we add 3 and 4 because we're not sure what else it has, but it's not. And then when we add 4, there's Anthidiellum, and it very well could have had 4. And we would add, and it's not flared out. It does not have this particular feature here. Then female, oh, wait a minute. Never mind. This is actually a female. We have a male, and this was a female character. So, well, it was a good exercise in looking at that. So we're going to skip over the shortcuts. You might know that it's Anthidiellum, and then you're down to 4. But in this case, we're going to pretend we don't. Female, okay, not a female. Male, head and antennal length, short, not usually elongate. Somebody antenna, okay, moderately long, tips reaching back to the tegula. So this one is short, and their Anthidiellum stays in there. This is bringing out things like in the males, the Userini and others that can have incredibly long antennae. Female face, okay, we're not looking at that. Male, presence of non-metallic white, yellow. Yes, we do have that. And it's dropped a few. Head labral process. Do not count the sometimes dense hairs at the apex of the labrum. We can't see the apex very well or at all because the mandibles are covering it in this case. And so we're looking at whether it's broad, equal, or long. And again, let's go back to the microscope we had about that view. Here's the problem. Like if those mandibles were open, the labrum, which is sitting below it, would be visible. And we sometimes, by rocking things back and forth, you might be able to see that maybe that labrum is sticking out, and you can infer that it's going to be long or something else. But I think in this particular case, I'm going to try and hold this with my hands. I don't think we're going to be able to see enough from even underneath the specimen. Let's see if I can do this by hand to tell. So yeah, first of all, hand holding with this microscope is problematic. It's too dark. So sometimes you can tell without the mandibles open. This is why a lot of people will spread the mandibles for that feature, which we can't see at all. So that's not useful in this particular case. Another female character, female, head, mouth parts, long tongue bees, label process. So this is one that I almost never use, short tongue bees. So I'm can't, and the problem is, again, if the tongue is not visible, which it's not right now, or I would have to look inside the notch below that bottom of the head, this is not a useful characteristic. I could try to soften it and pull the tongue. Sometimes you can, sometimes the mandibles will not open, so you can pull the tongue. So if you don't have tongue architecture, this is not useful. Head, number of subantennal sutures. Let's take a look at that and see if, unlike in the Andrina, we can get a better idea of subantennal sutures. here in a bee that has less fewer things going on in terms of hair on the face. So let's zoom in. Oh, good. We got some light correction going on by the camera. All right. So, oh, very nice. All right. Antennae. This is the scape. This is the fossa. This thing down here probably has a name, but I never use it. Here, very clearly in this particular case, remember how hard, next to impossible, really, in Andrina it was, but they were dark-skinned or dark integument. This has very light integument, and there's the suture lines here. Here's the clypeus. These are pits. I think these are called tentorial pits. I could be wrong. And we see that when we're looking at this, there's only, so each fossa has either one or two subantennal sutures that are coming off of the fossa in this case. So in this case, we only see one. Let's take a look at that. And it's fairly well arched, which I think sometimes is number of subantennal sutures is 1. And that takes us down to 6. Let's keep going. We could hit simplify again and create a new guide with now these 6, but we'll continue. Head, tongue, glossa, tip shape. Can't see the tongue right now, or if we did, I'd have to really tip the bee upside down, and I believe in this particular one, it's just simply too far retracted under the head for me to tell. So that's not useful. Secondary characteristics. So here's this wing marginal cell, tip shape. So rounded, pointed, laying right on the wing, or, and this was always the tricky part in Michener's guide, it bent away from the margin or squared off with the tip less than 3 vein widths from the margin. If you recall, when we looked at the specimen, it was not only rounded at the tip, we can click on some of these pictures here, but it was, so you can see this picture right here. This is what we saw under the microscope, perhaps a little dark. That tip is rounded, also quite a distance. The apex is quite a distance from the marginal cell, so we can pretty safely go there. And now we're still at 6, so that wasn't useful, but you saw where it can come into play. Megachilidae only, well, first of all, we look at this list, that's not megachilidae only at this point, so we may come back to that. We may see it again if we hit simplify after we've dropped things down to megachilidae only. So here's our jugal-divanal lobe, and we're going to skip it again. You can see that 6 were scored for the less than and only 1 for the more than. So unless you had that more than case, it's not a useful character in a lot of ways. Thorax, propodium, sculpturing in the basal area found just posterior to the metanotum. So this is the presence of basically strong, I don't have a good illustration of it, with a complete latitudinal band of strong squarish pits. And this band had been separated from the rest of the propodium by a carina and a raised line found posterior to it. As you saw, we have this big carina sitting over the edge of the propodium, so we really can't see whether there's pits present or not, but we're going to click it and just see what happens. And it obviously is not the case, even if we could see it in Anthidiellum. So we keep going. Leg, middle tarsi pair, tibial spines on end nearest tarsi. That's a tricky one to see. We might have to come back to that on some cases. I'm going to skip that for now. That has to do with stelus identification. Here we have a megachilidae only. Okay, again, we're not sure whether we're looking at only megachilidae. Look, we can get all these species back by clicking search again. Okay, it's because we clicked off this button up here where we were exploring the latitudinal band, and that's something that's encouraged. Here is something, Anthidiellum versus, and as you go further in the guide, you get to these this versus that one's. Anthidiellum versus selected other genera. So here we have Scutellum extends posterior as a broad, thin, squared off shelf. And others, note only 2 are there, Scutellum rounded over or rarely bilobed. We won't read the rest of it, but we also can see that the subantennal sutures distinctly arched outward. So we saw both of those in ours. We're like, oh yeah, that fits. But right now, we're only down to 4. So what that's done is gotten rid of or separated Anthidiellum from only 2 others in our list. And the reason for that might have been that based on the original identification guide, we already had made decisions prior to this that divorced Anthidiellum from these other species here, which are distinctly different. So so we could, maybe in the guide, we should go back and look this over and see, we can make the Anthidiellum versus almost everything else be a part of this identification character. So these others, why not? I think in most cases, nothing else has a scutellum that is extended as a bronze, thin, squared off shelf. So this is something that I'm noting that as we're using this, that will change, because we can score this character to get rid of all of these and many others, because nothing else has this. This is unique to Anthidiellum for most of the species. We might do something with not score a few things like Anthidium, because Anthidium could be mistaken for having this thin squared off shelf. But most of the others, we should have gotten rid of them. So we'll change the guide on that one. Now, we're just going to hit simplify and pretend like we didn't know to have stop there. So I hit simplify. Now I have a new guide. Anything that we didn't click is still there. That helps differentiate these 4. And we can, I think I'm going to stop and jump down to Anthidium now, so we get another species in there. But you can then go through and choose another whole series of specimens here that allow you to start separating out these further. There's lots of different characters that you can choose from here. So we can, by clicking on these different characters, which I don't feel like is worth our time working on, you can get to the answer relatively quickly. But I'm going to stop so that we can get to another genus. So I'm going to stop there. The male and female Anthidiellums are similar in that they have that shelf-like projection of the scutellum, which now you have at least a little bit of a idea what that looks like, and have the single subantennal suture that's strongly arched out. So let me put this away so I don't lose track of where things go. And this one gets associated there. And we will get out the very similar looking Anthidium. So if we go now to the memorization sheet and we look at Anthidiums here, and let's see, do we have a male or female under this microscope? Let me just do a quick look. We have a female. Okay, that's good. Gives a slight contrast to what we did last time, because we were working with a male, and you'll see the scopal hair is under the abdomen in the females. So here is the, let's make this larger for people. Can I do that? Oops, I just changed everything. I'm not sure I can make this larger on the screen, but if we go, if you perhaps can look up here at the top screen, you can see it has no aurolium. It has two submarginal cells, has yellow and white markings, again, like Anthidiellum. And the subantennal sutures, instead of being arched, are nearly straight. And then the female has 6 or more teeth on the mandible. So let's see if we can see those features. And we'll also look at the contrasting issue of, does it have that lamellate shelf on the backside? So in general, Anthidiums, but not always, are bigger bodied than Anthidiellums. All right, so dirty specimen, not unusual. Scutum, pin is going through the scutum. There's one of the wing bases, the tegula over it. Here is the scutellum and metanotum and pronotum, all basically almost on a complete face. This is sometimes characteristic of the Megachilidae. You don't have this nice dorsal area that's of the propodium, and the metanotum and the scutellum are all on the same plane as the scutum. Everything sort of drops off. Very different, if you know what you're looking for, than what we found in the Anthidium. So there's no shelf-like projection here at all. It's just a straight downward drop. Let me see if I can get a second specimen of this. Let's see if I can get it as a female. Yeah, so here we go again. So we'll look at this one. A little bit cleaner. That's the same thing. You can see this has markings that are similar in color and general patterns to Anthidiellum, but here's the scutellum again back here, and you see things that are kind of bumped out. This is where people get confused. Like, is that the lamellate shelf that people are talking to? So if you have never seen that, it gets confusing. So again, we're looking now at the scutum. There's a suture, scutellum, axilla, and while it projects a little bit out above this drop off of the metanotum and the propodium, it really doesn't have that thin shelf projecting way out. So that's an obvious difference there. Now, when we look at Megachilidae in general, for the pollen-carrying groups, they all have pollen-carrying hairs under their abdomen. So this is what pollen-carrying hairs look like in the Megachilidae. Long hairs, usually pointing slightly backwards. And so that right away is going to pull, having those hairs pulls you into a much smaller subset of specimens, or of genera. Trying to do two things at once. Now let's go to the head. So we'll look at a couple things here. One is the mandibles. So here's a mandible that has opened, probably of its own accord, because we never actually do this. This color here is just goop from regurgitant of the specimen, or something that happened during processing. But you can see here are a whole series of teeth on the mandible, which help separate it out from several of the other groups of Anthidiellum that will have this general colorful pattern. Heavy body, carries the pollen underneath their abdomen features. And you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's supposed to have 6 or more. There is perhaps another tooth in there that we are not seeing well enough. But we will take it that it has 6 or more, which was the character in there, and that we haven't misidentified something else. But so there's the multi-tooth feature. This is Anthidiellum manicatum, an introduced species into the east. And now let's see if we can see the subantennal suture. So in a lot of, I'm going to orient it so that it's like what we saw on the other one. So a lot of times, particularly with these species that have colored in areas, the suture lines become color boundaries. They don't really bleed across for whatever reason. So orientation, here's the fossa, that's escape for the antenna there, and then there's the other one over here. This area between the subantennal sutures and the and an imaginary line between the antenna. This is called the supraclypeus, so the thing above the clypeus. And sometimes this area is important in terms of identification, whether it has any kind of yellow or other light colored markings in here or not is useful. But you can see the suture, the subantennal, again, the subantennal sutures are coming off of the edges, so to speak, of the fossa. And trying to get a better view here. And the yellow are of the area to outside of the clypeus. Here's the clypeus. So this area here to either side, outside of the supraclypeal area that's defined by the subantennal sutures outside of the clypeus. This is called the paraocular or paraocular area. And again, depending on the group in species ID, the amount of yellow and how extensive it is used quite a bit. So now back to our friends, the, I'm gonna move this over a little bit. Our friends, the subantennal lines, if you recall the Anthidiellum suture, it basically was like this nice bowed out curve like this, uniform throughout. And here, while not straight, is certainly not bowed out and is more conforms to what would be called a straight line. So that's another character of Anthidium. And if we see if we can find a convenient see how all these bees curl their legs up here. Let's see if I can use maybe the other one as an example for, yeah, this has legs that are a little more available for inspection. So I'm going to go for that one because that's a good view. I can see, even though not in focus, I can see the tarsal claws are spread out there. And if we zoom in again, so tarsal claw, there's a tooth on the tarsal claw, and in between, this in-between area, there is no pad. There are hairs, which sometimes if these are small, right? So sometimes you might mistake this hairy area for a physical structure with integument and as pad-like, but in this case, you know, again, with some angling around, which I'll try and do here a little bit, we can see that, oops, here's another leg right there, that we cannot find a pad-like structure between those tarsal claws. So in bees at the genus level, this is usually a solid character. It's either the genus has them or not. And relatively few genera have no pad there. So most of them do have their aurolium. So when you see something that doesn't, you know that you can jump in the guide to that character very quickly. So let's take a quick tour. We're running.
Sam, you have 15 minutes with 2 questions.
Okay, why don't we do the questions right now? What are the questions?
So someone asked, so sometimes the keys ask about a characteristic of a tooth in a particular position or the teeth counted from the inside to out.
Yeah, so I think in our guides, we try to let you know when we talk about the third tooth, how we're counting. So in general, the tip, which would be the part of the mandible furthest from the inner edge, would be the tooth number 1, and then you would count from there to the interior. And depending on the person doing the review or the species group, sometimes, for example, there'll be a right angle edge on the at the very innermost part of the mandible that sometimes is counted as a tooth, even though it's really just a corner, and sometimes not. So it's a little bit dependent. We've tried, again, we're always welcome to, if anything's confusing, then we should be able to add in more information and to update those kinds of things. And but that's the general pattern. The outermost ones furthest away from the inside edge is tooth number 1. I wouldn't be completely surprised that someone has reversed that in some kind of revision for a particular group, but that's the general pattern. There was another question?
There was. PD asked, this was earlier during the class, what are the precautions you must take while spreading the bee specimen so that we can see as many morphological characters as possible?
So the question was, what precautions do you take to spread a specimen so you can see as many morphological characters as possible? So the main precaution is to do it when they're fresh. So fresh meaning just caught out of the kill jar or the bowl or whatever, then is the time to spread the mandibles and pull the tongue. Also, if you were, as some people do, and particularly old school, create a museum quality specimen where you might also spread the wings and flatten them and use pins to shape where the legs go. That's all done immediately after killing. You can do it immediately after alcohol, but alcohol tends to stiffen the specimen. It becomes more and more difficult the more time something has been in alcohol. And then if you have a dried specimen, it's impossible dried. You'll just snap something off. But you can rehydrate it. But even after rehydrating, and by rehydrating, it usually means placing them in some kind of enclosed plastic container, floating on top of floating, meaning like on a piece of styrofoam with hot water below it. It will, they're often reluctant in particular to move the mandibles at that point, and you'll often end up harming the specimen. It takes a little bit of work to do that. So I will also say that our approach is to do none of that because we're a volume shop. And what we try to do is have identification guides and characters that don't require you to look at the tongue and to come up with the answer, or to look at genitalia for the species. Sometimes, but it's actually pretty rare, you actually do need to do that. And certainly if that's your orientation, those are good characters, but you would then have to have access to genitalia, tongues, mandibles to do that. Mandibles and labrums sometimes are visible even though they're folded together in terms of the particular feature you want. But I can tell you that it is kind of a gift to have specimens with their mandibles spread, because a lot of times it's just so much easier to see things like a small tooth hidden towards the back of the specimen rather than trying to peer through hairs, folded over areas, or underneath the head of the specimen. Your call. It's time consuming though. But, museums love that. That's a much better specimen to gift to a museum than the kinds of things that we just roll through. Okay, so you can see we left the guide here. To reset the guide, you go up to just click on restart. It's restarted the guide on the right, but there's your last specimens. You can just get everything back by clicking search.
Yeah, real quick.
Yeah.
Someone during that also asked, how does one pull the tongue? Someone answered, but how would you like to give your feedback on how
Yeah,
to do
so someone asked about pulling the tongue. There's someone in the chat group who spoke about that, but again, I don't do that. When I've seen people like Rob Jean and Mike Arduzer do it, they're using just insect pins sometimes with the very, very tip of the pin slightly bent over to form a hook. And that's all I'm going to say. So please, anyone else who has experience with specimen preparation that involves pinning and spreading and pulling genitalia and things, please put some comments into the chat for folks, because I'm a poor representative of doing that. Genitalia, same way. You grab a hooked pin and go in there, and you're able to pull out the genitalia. That's all I know. Okay, so here we are. We've restarted the guide. We're going to jump around. We're going to say, okay, yeah, we almost always would say where we are. We're in Maryland. We get back to our 55 genera again. You can click or not click any of these search buttons as much as you want there. We've got all the colors that are different. We have some bright yellow in there. It's a tame, not pointed out margin. It's got, we didn't look at this, it's got 2 submarginal cells. It is has a straight basal vein. We didn't look at that, but again, I'm trying to move through. And we also have the aerolium absent. Now I'm just going to click search there, and we're down to 3. So that's pretty darn good in terms of a return for clicking on a few things. You notice I skipped a bunch of things doing that. That's generally, as you get going, how you're going to do. You're going to have some sense of what's going to give you a good return, and you'll have a sense from looking at the vibe, so to speak, of a specimen that, oh, I'm probably it's probably a megachilides, so I'm going to answer those kinds of questions first. As long as you're not guessing on any of these questions, that's the way to go. But you start second guessing or guessing period, then your results are going to be poor, because once the correct answer is off that list, you don't get it back. So now I've seen this. I could continue to answer some of these questions, but I'm like, all right, I'm just going to hit simplify. I know a little bit about these things. These are very similar-ish looking things. Pseudanthidium is an introduced Anthidiellum from, in this case, Europe. That's now in Eastern North America. And so I've got to separate those out. I've got lengths and females and males. I often find that's not terribly useful. You can see that a lot of these lengths are scored for multiple groups here in the middle anyway. So female, so in this case, I've got an Anthidium. I know that we're down here because we counted them, right, with 5 or more distinct teeth. So we're clicking that, and now we have 2. So I'm going to hit the simplify button again and see how this is handled. Anthidium versus pseudo-Anthidium. So first of all, I am noting right now that I have only, so I see all ones here. I may need to have a character that separates these 2 out because everything below here is, look at how well we are doing on the guides and learning things ourselves. So here are the answered questions, right? I can review those. I can't change them. 5 minutes left. Okay. And but this is good. And but in terms of ones that are left unscored, you can see these only have the number 1 next to them. So the Pseudanthidium, I'm going to guess, has never been scored for this character. And so we can just try. Clicking on any of them is going to do nothing for us, right? Oh, wait a minute. Huh. So Pseudanthidium is very small. I wonder if it actually does separate them out. So Pseudanthidium is down there is a tiny little Anthidiellum thing. Oh, it does. Never mind. So size, apparently, I would like to have a character that was more explicit than just size, but apparently size does separate out the 2, and that's why So we have a little routine that checks for lack of resolution between groups of species or genera. And so it looks like these resolve just by using a size thing. And well, let's see if that's true. So, okay, we unclicked everything. So we have 2. Now I'm curious, what if I click 8, which seems large for a pseudoanthidium? So if I had a female, it doesn't resolve. So I need to go in and either score, which this is not scored at all for pseudoanthidium, check my female collections for pseudoanthidium and add those smaller ones in. You can see it goes up to 8 millimeters, which is bigger than probably all the pseudoanthidiums out there. All right, now I'm talking to myself, and I'm going to stop because this is a good endpoint. We will next time we can answer questions now. If there's questions, we'll stay online. Sydney, did I press I think I did press the record button. Thank goodness. Next time we'll be getting into another entirely different group, Anthophora. Again, you can predict what we're doing. We're going alphabetical. Right now, we don't have access to the national collection, so some of the odder genera from out west, I can't really go through because I don't have them in our personal collection. We'll circle back eventually to do those, or we'll invite some Westerners to start participating in these identification guide things. So that's where I am. Are there any questions? I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. Oh, is that that was a down thing. Oh, wait, I'm not in the guide. All right. There we go. Okay. Any questions? Sydney, is there anything in the chat that we should be looking at? Okay.
Sam, I do have a question.
Okay.
I am sampling bees in Oklahoma, and when I'm going through the keys, are there any additional states that I should click on to kind of, or to make the search better?
Yeah. So in terms of the guides, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. At the genus level, the guide should work fine in Oklahoma. At the species level, Mike Arduzer and I are currently working on, mostly Mike, currently working on bringing in to the Discover Life keys species level IDs for everything east of the 100th meridian. But it's a work in progress. So sometimes you won't see an Oklahoma button at all, which does in some of the species level guides, because we haven't gotten to it yet. And sometimes the Oklahoma button has only a couple of scored specimens that are new, but does not show all the species for the state yet. So my suggestion is to well, first of all, take a look at the guide and see if it's really been bumped out to Oklahoma yet, which is on the last states that we're working on. You can use one of the east of the Mississippi states that are nearby, like, you could click several. So you click Mississippi, Tennessee, and Kentucky as a good start. But just be aware that the guides for Oklahoma are incomplete, and whatever your answers are have to be qualified, like, because of that. So the problem is you don't have a whole lot of alternatives, right? So, okay, let's say Discover Life guides are incomplete for Oklahoma. What do I do? The answer is you are in trouble because you would have to go to the old literature, pull up a revision for a genus, cross-reference that to current lists of species to see if any of the species names have changed, and whether there were subsequent corrections to the genus. It just goes on and on. So, but my my answer to you would be to just start with the eastern states, because they're going to have about 70%, no, probably more like 80 to 90% of the species in Oklahoma, particularly if you're in eastern Oklahoma, not all that cool Shinnery Oak area. And then you could even contact Mike. You can later email me, or if you don't know Mike, I can put you in touch. He likes Oklahoma, and have him check over your work.
Yeah, I'll probably seek out his help once I get more bees collected and
yeah,
everything. So, all right, thank you. I've been clicking on Texas, so it's nice to know to actually go toward the eastern states instead of Texas, because I'm sampling closer to Texas. So
yeah, Texas is also in the same boat. So again, for the genus level, you're good.
okay.
When you get to species, that whole Texas to Nebraska to North Dakota, South Dakota, Kansas, Oklahoma is really raw in terms of how far we've taken the guides yet.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one question that someone typed in the chat that I
Okay.
Tracy Zulo asked, I vaguely remember John Asher saying that the color of the tegula separate pseudo-Anthidiellum from Anthidium. I don't have one on hand. Is that the case?
So the question was whether the color of the tegula separates Anthidium from pseudo-Anthidium. And the answer is, I don't know. I'll have to look. We should have, I think I have a few of those specimens in our collection, and that might work. If anyone else knows, and this is a species / genus coming to you because it loves industrial areas. That's where we've been finding it. Brownfield, downtown Baltimore, like the worst possible circumstance, crown vetch, all that kind of stuff. So be aware that this may show, and I don't know what Bug Guide or iNaturalist is showing, but be aware that it could jump to pretty much anywhere in the country, I would suppose. But I don't know that tegula. Thanks, Tracy, for mentioning that. All right. I'm not hearing anything else. So I'm going to click off the record button. We'll be around for a little bit. Oh, yeah.
Hi, Sam. This is Hongwei. So do we have the access to watch the recording later?
Yeah. Yep. So Claire, Claire might be on and can put that link into the chat, or someone else could put the link in the chat. But if you do a Google search on CAR, so that's KJAR, and Droege, DROEGE, that will jump you to a website that has all these things recorded. And this is, as long as I do it successfully, it will be there too.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Hi, I got to join. The link is in the chat. It'll also be in your follow-up emails. It's the same link for the whole list, and they're just kind of being listed there for now. We aim for them to be up by the weekend, but it kind of depends on our hosting friend and when he has a moment to get it up.
Yeah, he's doing it free. So Dan is one of our heroes, as is Craig, who is the person who lent this lovely computer talking to microscope thing that makes this work. So yeah, we're a pretty low budget operation here. This is a garage after all. So you're not looking at science with 2 capital S's. Although we think of ourselves that way. All right, I'm going to stop recording and